Hello and welcome back to the channel. So, last time I did the crafting deep dive, looking at the new complex crafting rules from Treasure Vault, and because of that, I wanted to do kind of a crafting focused character for this week. So I spent some time thinking about what I could cover. Right, obviously all alchemical items is pretty broad, and crafting focused character is kind of generic, as which items character wants is going to depend a lot on the character's build and what they do. Then I thought of the perfect solution, and that is snares. So snares are a special consumable in PF2 that work a little differently than most pieces of equipment in the system. Snares are a equipment type which you actually craft in the field. So by default, most snares will take a minute to craft, and you craft them in the place where you want to set the snare. Now once it is done, you can't move the snare afterwards without destroying it, but the snare will exist there until the end of time, or until a creature activates it, usually by entering its square. To craft a snare, you need to spend the full price of the snare each time you create one. Although you are allowed to spend extra days reducing the price as per normal, you will have to spend those days crafting the snare in place. So you have to spend multiple days at the same location, reducing the price of the snare down to a minimum of half price, as per usual for the crafting rules. There are also guidelines on how monsters might try to detect or disarm your snare. In order to detect your snare, the monster needs to have a perception check that beats your crafting DC, which is used in place of the normal snare stealth DC. However, once you're an expert in crafting, the monster needs to be trained in perception to find your snares, and can only find your snares if they're actively searching for them. If you're master in crafting, the monster needs to be an expert in perception, and if you're legendary, the monster needs to have a master in perception. Now, normally NPCs don't get skill proficiencies in the same way players do. They'll often just say, hey, this monster has a plus 11 to their perception, without specifically calling out whether they're trained, expert, master, or legendary in perception. So there will need to be a little bit of GM adjudication on if the monster is or is not able to detect the snare. However, what is definitely true is that once you're an expert in crafting, which can happen as early as level 3, monsters will need to be actively searching for your snare to even have a chance of finding it. Meaning that if they're just wandering around, you can pretty easily set up a trap that they have essentially no way of detecting. And finally, disabling snares requires a monster's thievery skill against your crafting DC, similar to perception. And once again, similar to perception, the monster needs to be at least one rank lower than you with their thievery than you are in your crafting. So if you're an expert in crafting, they need to be trained. If you're a master, they need to be expert. And if you're legendary in crafting, they need to be master in thievery. Now this has the same problem as perception, where monster skill proficiencies aren't called out in the trained, expert, master, legendary track that players get. But it's also a little bit easier because monsters won't always have uh, a thievery bonus. So for the most of them that don't, it's going to be impossible for them to disarm the trap anyways. So now you might say that's all well and good. There are a couple of glaring issues with snares as they are as base. First of all, they require a minute to craft, so unless you're defending a static location and also have forewarning of when a battle is coming, it's going to be pretty difficult to use snares effectively. And when most adventurers are off dungeon delving, clearing rooms one at a time, it's going to be almost impossible for you to set a snare that's useful in a combat scenario. The second issue is that snares, like almost every other damaging consumable, runs into the problem with PF2's level added to proficiency system. Because DCs are static and damage is static, as your level scales up, low level snares very quickly fall off in both DC and damage, meaning that creatures are significantly more likely to succeed the save, and even when they do fail, they're going to take significantly less damage proportionally than an on-level snare would deal, requiring you to spend enormous amounts of gold to keep up your damage potential. However, there are a number of feats in PF2 that actually address both of these issues, so let's get into them. The first feat, and the most necessary, is going to be the skill feat snare crafting. This is what allows you to craft snares at all, and also once you pick it up, you get 4 common snare formulas for free. Note that this doesn't have the normal restriction of other similar crafting feats like magical crafting or alchemical crafting, where the snare formulas have to be level less than or equal to 2. So if you pick this up at a higher level, or you just like a really high level snare that you want to make sure you have access to, you can pick that up as part of your feat for snare crafting. Beyond that first snare crafting skill feat, if you want to be a snare specialist, you really want to convince your GM to let you play the uncommon ancestry the call. Starting at level 1, you get Snare Center, which grants you access to all uncommon cobalt snares, as well as the snare crafting feat for free. Now, there are only 3 uncommon cobalt snares in the game right now, but it is still a nice expansion of options to have if you want to play a snare-focused character. At level 5, you get access to Snare Genius, which allows you every day to prepare 3 snares from your formula book for quick deployment. Not only do they not only take 3 interact actions to deploy instead of the normal 1 minute, but they also don't require any resources for you to craft. So, very similar to an alchemist, you now get a few extra free daily resources per day to spend as you like. At level 9, Snare Commando allows you to either create a diversion or demoralize as a reaction to someone failing or crit failing a save against your snare. And Vicious Snares at level 13 gives you a little bit of extra flat damage on every snare you craft. I also want to take a quick second to shout out the Sewer Dragon background as the only background I could find that actually grants snare crafting as its skill feat. Now this obviously won't overlap with snare crafting that you get from the Cobalt first level feat. However, if you want to take a different first level feat, taking Sewer Dragon as your background will allow you to do that, since the main benefit of that Cobalt feat is to just give you snare crafting for free anyways. Next up for boosting our snare's efficacy is the Ranger class, and I want to start with the level 9 class feature Nature's Edge, which makes enemies who are flat-footed due to difficult terrain resulting from either natural circumstances or a snare to be flat-footed to you. Now, flat-footed is certainly a somewhat easy condition to come by, but more sources of flat-footed is never going to harm you. First on the docket for feats is the level 2 focus spell Snare Hopping. This allows you for 2 actions to take a snare that you've already placed and magically teleport it to another unoccupied location in range. This range starts at 10 feet, but every heightened level, the range increases by 10 feet, up to a maximum of 100 feet once you have access to level 10 spells. But of course, the main reason to come to Ranger is the Snare Specialist feat they get at level 4. This is very similar to the Cobalt Snare Genius feat, but souped up a little bit. You get a few free formulas into your formula book, and you can prepare a number of snares for free at the beginning of every day. And like the Cobalt feat, if they would normally take a minute to craft, which most snares do, they instead can be crafted in 3 actions, allowing you to do so within 1 combat round. Of course, if you want to be able to craft a snare in 3 actions, it does have to be one of the ones you prepared at the beginning of the day. All other snares still take the 1 minute craft time as normal. However, you can change that with quick snares at level 6, which makes all snares, regardless of if you've prepared them at the beginning of the day or not, take only 3 actions to craft. And Lightning snares at level 12 make it so all snares, regardless of if you prepare them or not, take only a single action to prepare in combat, leaving you with 2 additional actions on your turn to do with as you please. Powerful snares at level 8 solve the scaling issue by making the snare DC equal to your class DC. And if you worry about running out of snares over the course of the day, Ubiquitous Snares at level 16 doubles the number of snares you can prepare from Snare Specialist. So instead of the 8 snares you normally get from having a legendary proficiency, you would get 16 instead. And if that's still not enough, Impossible Snares at level 20 allow you to, once a minute, craft a snare you've prepared for free without expending the prepared snare. These snares do only last 10 minutes. However, what this means is that effectively, once a minute, you can pump out a snare without losing any of your prepared resources. Next up is the Snarecrafter archetype, and leading off with the dedication, which is essentially a carbon copy of the Snare Specialist feat from Ranger. You can prepare a number of free snares from your formula book for quick deployment, and these snares will only take 3 actions to craft instead of the 1 minute normally. Now there's also a special note where this snare to craft dedication counts as snare specialist for the purpose of feat prerequisites, and if you have the snare specialist ranger feat on top of it, the number of prepared snares you can get at the start of the day stack. Now, there's a little bit of a question of whether the dedication counts for ubiquitous snares, doubling the number of free snares you get. Since it only says for the purpose of feat prerequisites, it's more likely that it's going to be no. However, if you can convince the GM otherwise, you can get a really absurd number of free snares per day from both of them combined. Next up is Surprise Snare at level 4, which for 3 actions allows you to install a snare on top of an enemy. Normally snares, even the quick deployment, need to be installed on an empty space, and then you're relying on the enemy to walk or be shoved into that square to trigger it. However, with Surprise Snare you can forego all the extra nonsense and just trigger it directly on top of them. They do get a effective +2 to their save by reducing the save DC of the snare that you install. However, sometimes avoiding that additional extra step of forcing them to walk onto the square that the snare is in can be very much worth it. Remote Trigger at level 6 allows you to strike your snare and automatically trigger it, and if it's a snare that you created, you automatically hit the snare, meaning if you have a bow and arrow, you can trigger your snare from as far as 100 or 200 feet away. Giant Snare at level 10 allows you to spend 2 snares out of your prepared daily snares to create a giant square instead of a normal sized one. Instead of the 5 foot by 5 foot square that a standard snare occupies, this giant square will occupy a 10 foot by 10 foot area, meaning that it's a much larger area for an enemy to avoid if they're trying to not trigger your snares. And finally, we have a number of feats that are shared with the Ranger snare feats. Quick snares, lightning snares, and powerful snares are all carbon copies of the Ranger feat of the same name. And Plentiful Snares is an effective copy of Ubiquitous Snares from Ranger, except applying to the Snarecrafter dedication instead of the Ranger's Snare Specialist feat. Note this doesn't serve as a prerequisite for Impossible Snares, the level 20 capstone from Ranger, so if you want that, you're still going to need to get the Ubiquitous Snare feat from Ranger. And finally we have the Chapsmith archetype, which is an uncommon archetype from Guns and Gears focused around clockwork snares. Its dedication requires one of Snarecrafter's dedication or the Snare Specialist Ranger feat, and it allows you to create clockwork snares instead of the normal snares that you would make. If you do make a snare clockwork, which doesn't cost anything extra, so really there's no reason not to do it, if a creature fails its save against the snare, a jet of steam gusts into the eyes and causes all other creatures to be concealed to the tricking creature for a round. Notably, this doesn't conceal that creature to other creatures like a lot of these concealment effects do. So this is purely one-sided concealment and can only benefit the party. As for the other feats that the archetype offers, we have Gear Nash level 4, which makes your snares a little bit harder to disable if anyone were to try to do so. We also have Propeller Attachment at 7 that allows you to float your snares in midair or underwater, meaning that they aren't rendered useless if you happen to be in an aerial combat or an underseas adventure. Notably, both of these are skill feats, so even though they're of questionable utility normally, they don't conflict with your normal class feats to pick them up. Next we have Recycled Cogwheel at 8, which allows you to pick up a snare that you've previously deployed and store it for later use. So, if you deploy a snare and the combat ends and it didn't go off, you can scavenge it back for parts and redeploy it at a later date. Next we have Repurposed Parts at level 10, which grants you a little bit of flexibility in your daily preparations. If you find you need a snare that you didn't prepare for that day, you can spend 2 of your daily snares to craft a snare that you didn't have prepared previously. This does cost 2 for 1, but it allows you to prepare more commonly used snares that you know you're going to want to use, and if the situation comes up where a situational snare is useful, then you can have this in your back pocket and make sure you have that available if you need it. And finally we have finessed features at 12, which makes your snares a little bit smarter on when they actually trigger. Normally they just trigger whenever a small or larger creature steps into the space, but now you can set a trigger based on visual identification. For example, you could say when an orc steps into the snare space, or someone with a red scarf. So much all of the feats and features in PF2 that I could find that help boost up your snares. Now this normally is where I go in on how I would build a snare specialist if I were to bring one, but I think that's pretty straightforward and obvious. Just take all the snare feats and you're good to go. So in lieu of that, I'm going to discuss something that might not be as obvious, which is the strategy of playing a snare specialist. So the biggest problem with snares is that they have to be set up in an unoccupied space, and then an enemy has to walk into them to trigger it. This is doubly so an issue because, by default, even with the snare specialist feats, snares take 3 actions to craft, meaning it takes your entire round in combat to do so. And it's not until level 12 with lightning snares that you can actually reduce it to 1 action. What this means is snares, more so than normal in PF2, is going to require a lot of teamwork to really make work. You're going to need to make sure that you are in place to put the snare where it needs to be, and then a team member or someone off of your turn needs to be available to shove the opposing creature into your snare. Additionally, the 3 actions required to set up your snare is going to make it very difficult for you to maneuver to the correct location to actually set your snare up. I might even consider playing a monk for this exact reason to get that increased move speed if it weren't for the snare hopping focus spell, which is only available to rangers and is probably too good to pass up. This kind of soft ability issue will allow you to spend 2 actions to move the snare in a radius anywhere between 10 and 100 feet wide from your location. Because of this spell, you can fairly easily set up a snare before the battle starts, and even if you guess wrong, just at some point spend a focus point to move the snare to where you actually need it. Now, even with this, I would still probably want some way to get a little extra mobility, and because of that, I would probably want some way to get a 4th action to start on my turn. The obvious way is convince your party wizard to cast haste on you, or get a couple points of haste in a way to use them. But if you're playing with free archetype and can finagle a couple extra feats into your build, pick up an animal companion and mounting it, allowing it to use its stride action to move you across the battlefield to where you need to set up your snares, can be a very easy way to get a little extra mobility while you're setting up your snares. And finally, I want to end off with a reminder to not hoard your snares. You do have a limited amount of them per day, but really you get quite a lot of snares, especially in comparison to the limited features that other classes get. If you pick up the 3 feats that give you free snares per day, Snare Genius from Cobalt, Snare Specialist from Ranger, and the Snarecrafter Dedication, and level 4 with Expert in Crafting, you get 3 free snares from Snare Genius, 4 from Snare Specialist, and another 4 from Snare Crafter, meaning you get a total of 11 free snares per day. This, combined with the fact that it's somewhat awkward to use snares in comparison to other consumables, means that it's going to very easily last you the entire adventuring day, even if you're using them constantly in battle. For comparison, a level 4 alchemist gets 8 infused reagents to play with per day, and a level 4 spellcaster like a wizard or sorcerer gets a total of 8 spell slots, 4 first level and 4 second level. So in comparison with the other daily resource classes, you actually get quite a few snares per day, and this number will only increase as you level up and increase your proficiency in crafting. So that ends my video on snares and how we can use them in PF2. They certainly are a little bit awkward to use in combat, especially before level 12 when they still require 3 full actions to set up, but they are kind of a cool, unique part of the system that otherwise doesn't get a lot of attention. And through these snare feats, you can really make use of an equipment type that most, if not all, other characters are going to be basically irrelevant using. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, that you found it informative, and I hope you'll come back to see what I decide to explore next. But most of all, I hope you have a lovely day.